The New York skyline glittered against the dusk sky, a perfect backdrop for the penthouse that towered over Central Park. Inside, William Harrison surveyed his kingdom with quiet satisfaction. At 38, he had everything a man could want: a billion-dollar tech empire inherited from his father, Robert Harrison, one of America's most revered business tycoons, a home that graced the covers of architectural magazines, and a wife whose beauty turned heads at every charity gala they attended. William straightened his custom Tom Ford suit and adjusted his Patek Philippe watch, gifts to himself for closing a deal that added another zero to his net worth. He was the American dream personified, a beacon of success that young entrepreneurs across Manhattan aspired to become. His Instagram posts showing his morning routine garnered thousands of likes from followers desperate to replicate his formula for success. "Rebecca, the car will be here in 20 minutes, he called out, his voice echoing through the marble foyer. Rebecca Harrison emerged from their bedroom, a vision in emerald silk that complemented her auburn hair. At 26, she was still adjusting to the weight of the Harrison name. Their marriage had been more of a merger than a love match. Her family's old Boston money joining forces with the Harrison tech fortune. Her father, a senator with presidential ambitions, had encouraged the union, seeing it as advantageous for everyone involved. "You look stunning," William said, placing a chaste kiss on her cheek. "The board members will be impressed." Rebecca smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Is that all that matters? Impressing your board?" William missed the edge in her voice, already scrolling through emails on his phone. "Tonight is important, Becca. The Harrison Foundation Gala isn't just charity, it's business. Dad will be watching how we handle ourselves." Rebecca nodded and slipped on the diamond bracelet William had given her on their first anniversary. She remembered how excited she'd been then, a 20-year-old college dropout, suddenly thrust into New York high society. William had been attentive in those early days: surprise weekend trips to Paris, midnight champagne on their private terrace, handwritten notes left on her pillow when he had to leave early for work. But 3 years into their marriage, the romance had faded into routine. William's devotion to Harrison Technologies consumed him, leaving Rebecca to fill her days with meaningless lunches and shopping trips. Her art, once her passion, had been relegated to a hobby room William had designed for her, a beautiful space that felt more like a pretty cage than a studio. The elevator whisked them down to the waiting Bentley, where Thomas, their longtime driver, held the door open. "Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Harrison." As they glided through Manhattan traffic toward the gala venue, Rebecca watched the city lights blur together. She thought about the life she'd imagined for herself before meeting William: a small apartment in Brooklyn, canvases covering every surface, paint perpetually beneath her fingernails. Now her nails were perfectly manicured, and she couldn't remember the last time she'd properly painted. The Metropolitan Museum of Art had been transformed for the Harrison Foundation's annual gala. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the Great Hall, where New York's elite mingled among displays, highlighting the Foundation's work in education technology. "William, Rebecca!" Robert Harrison's commanding voice cut through the crowd as he approached them, champagne flute in hand. At 65, Robert remained imposing, tall and broad-shouldered, with a full head of silver hair and piercing blue eyes that matched his son's. "You're fashionably late." "Traffic, Dad," William said, accepting his father's firm handshake. "The mayor just arrived too." Robert turned to Rebecca, his gaze lingering a moment longer than appropriate as he kissed her cheek. "You outshine every woman here, as always." Rebecca felt a familiar flutter of discomfort mixed with something else, a response to Robert's attention that she didn't want to acknowledge. "Thank you, Robert. The event looks wonderful. Your vision for the foundation continues to impress." Robert placed a hand on the small of her back, guiding her toward the main exhibition. "Come, let me show you what your husband's been too busy to see. The new educational VR program is revolutionary." William was quickly pulled away by investors, leaving Rebecca alone with her father-in-law. This had become increasingly common over the past few months, Robert seeking her out at events, stopping by the penthouse when William was working late, calling to check on her when William was on business trips. "How are you really doing, Rebecca?" Robert asked, his voice lowering as they paused before a digital display. "William mentioned you've been distant lately." Rebecca stiffened. "Did he? That's surprising, considering how little time we actually spend together." Robert's expression softened with understanding that made Rebecca feel both seen and vulnerable. "My son is making the same mistakes I did, putting business before family. Helen left me because of it. I don't want to see history repeat itself." The mention of William's mother sent a pang through Rebecca. Helen Harrison had divorced Robert when William was just 12, unable to bear the loneliness of being married to a workaholic. She'd remarried and moved to Europe, becoming little more than a holiday presence in William's life. William and I are fine, Rebecca said automatically, the response practiced from countless social inquiries. Robert's eyes, so like William's but somehow warmer, held hers. "You don't have to pretend with me, Rebecca. I've known that look since Helen first wore it. You're drowning in that penthouse." The accuracy of his observation startled her. "I just need to find my purpose here. It's an adjustment." "Perhaps what you need is someone who truly sees you," Robert said, his fingers brushing against hers as he handed her a champagne flute. The touch, brief and possibly innocent, sent an electric current up her arm. Rebecca took a large sip, needing the alcohol's burn. "I should find William. He's networking with the West Coast investors. He'll be occupied for at least an hour." Robert guided her toward a quieter alcove. "Tell me about your art. William mentioned you've stopped painting." "He noticed?" Rebecca couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. "I asked," Robert admitted. "I've always been interested in your work. That piece you did for William's birthday, the abstract cityscape, showed real talent." The genuine appreciation in his voice touched Rebecca. William had hung the painting in his office, but had never commented on it beyond a perfunctory thank you. "I haven't felt inspired lately," she confessed. "Creation requires passion," Robert said, "and passion needs fuel." His gaze intensified. "Perhaps you need to experience more to express more." The implication hung between them, unspoken but palpable. Rebecca felt her cheeks flush and changed the subject. "How's the Malibu property? Coming along?" "Beautifully. The renovations will be complete next month." He paused. "You should come see it. The light there would be perfect for painting." "With William?" Robert's smile didn't reach his eyes. "My son is scheduled in Tokyo that week, but the Harrison jet is always available." The invitation lingered as William finally rejoined them, his expression brightening with rare warmth at the sight of his father and wife together. "Bonding without me?" William asked, slipping an arm around Rebecca's waist. "Just keeping your beautiful wife company," Robert replied. "Someone has to while you're charming investors." William laughed. "Dad always had a soft spot for the arts and beautiful artists." The comment seemed innocent, but Rebecca caught the knowing glance. Robert gave his son. There was history there, unspoken family dynamics that Rebecca was still learning to navigate after 3 years as a Harrison. As the evening progressed, Rebecca found herself increasingly aware of Robert's presence, the subtle brush of his hand when passing drinks, his attentive gaze when she spoke, the way he seemed to anticipate her needs before she expressed them. It was the kind of careful consideration William had shown during their courtship, but had long abandoned for spreadsheets and board meetings. Later that night, as William slept soundly beside her, Rebecca stared at the ceiling, replaying the evening in her mind. The attention Robert showed her was dangerous, not because it was unwelcome, but because it wasn't. In the emptiness of her gilded life, his interest felt like water in a desert. Rebecca turned to study her husband's profile in the dim light. William was handsome, successful, and completely focused on maintaining the Harrison legacy. She had married him believing that love would grow with time, that shared goals would unite them. Instead, she had become an accessory to his perfect life, the beautiful wife who appeared in photos and planned dinner parties, but remained fundamentally unknown. Her phone illuminated with a text. "Robert, you seemed unhappy tonight. Remember, cages, no matter how golden, are still cages. You deserve more." Rebecca stared at the message, her finger hovering over the delete button. Instead, she typed, "Thank you for noticing." 3 simple words that would change everything. 3 weeks after the gala, Rebecca found herself alone in the penthouse again. William had left for Singapore that morning. Another acquisition, another week of video calls instead of conversation. Over dinner, she wandered through the empty rooms, trailing her fingers along the expensive furniture that had been selected by an interior designer William had hired before their marriage. Nothing here truly felt like hers. Her phone chimed with a notification. "Robert, lunch today. There's a new exhibition at MoMA I thought you might enjoy." These messages had become frequent since the gala. Innocent at first, recommendations for books or exhibitions, then evolving into invitations. Rebecca had declined the first few, making excuses about appointments or charity commitments, but the persistent loneliness of her days made each refusal harder than the last. She typed back, "I'd like that. What time?" Robert's response came immediately. "I'll send the car for you at noon." Rebecca spent an hour selecting her outfit, a casual burgundy dress that flattered her figure, without seeming like she'd tried too hard. She told herself it was simply about looking appropriate for MoMA, not about the approval in Robert's eyes when he saw her. The Harrison family driver arrived precisely at noon, but instead of Thomas, Robert himself sat behind the wheel of a vintage Aston Martin convertible. "I thought we'd take the scenic route," he explained as she slid into the passenger seat. "It's too beautiful a day to spend in the back of a town car." The wind whipped through Rebecca's hair as they crossed the Brooklyn Bridge, a sense of freedom washing over her that she hadn't felt in years. Robert was different outside the confines of family gatherings and corporate events, more relaxed, funnier, his sharp business mind turning instead to observations about art and life that resonated with the person Rebecca had been before becoming Mrs. Harrison. At MoMA, Robert knew the curator personally, gaining them access to a preview of an installation not yet open to the public. Unlike William, who rushed through museums checking his watch, Robert lingered asking Rebecca's opinion on each piece, genuinely interested in her perspective. "You have a remarkable eye," he told her, as they discussed a particularly challenging installation. "You see layers most people miss." Rebecca felt herself blush. "I used to dream about having my work in a place like this." What happened to that dream? The question was gentle but direct, and Rebecca found herself answering honestly. "It seemed childish after I married William. The Harrison name comes, so with responsibilities, art doesn't fit into the schedule." Robert's expression darkened. "My son has a talent for acquiring beautiful things without appreciating their true value." His eyes held hers. "It's a family failing I've come to recognize too late in life." After the exhibition, they had lunch at a small bistro in Greenwich Village, far from the upscale restaurants where the Harrison name would be recognized. Robert ordered wine, and Rebecca didn't object, even though she rarely drank at lunch. There was something intoxicating about being treated as Rebecca the artist, not Rebecca the Harrison trophy wife. "William mentioned you're considering starting a family," Robert said as they lingered over dessert. Rebecca nearly choked on her espresso. "He said that?" "At our last board meeting. He presented it as part of his 5-year plan, expansion into Asian markets, the educational software division, and a Harrison heir." Robert's tone was neutral, but his eyes searched her face. "Is that what you want?" Rebecca stared into her cup. The truth was, William had been mentioning children more frequently, presenting logical arguments about timing and legacy. Never once had he asked if she was ready, if motherhood was what she wanted. "I don't know," she admitted. "Sometimes I feel like I barely know who I am anymore. How can I be someone's mother when I'm still trying to find myself?" Robert reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "You're an extraordinary woman, Rebecca, far more than the role. You've been assigned in the Harrison dynasty." His touch lingered and Rebecca didn't pull away. The connection between them had been building for months, in text messages that stretched into late-night conversations, in the way Robert listened when she spoke, in the books and articles he sent that showed he was paying attention to her, interests in a way William never had. "I should get home," she said finally, the guilt she should be feeling muted by the wine and the validation of being truly seen. Robert drove her back to Manhattan in comfortable silence. When they reached the penthouse building, he pulled into the private garage instead of dropping her at the entrance. "I'll walk you up," he said. It wasn't a question. In the elevator, standing closer than necessary, Rebecca felt a tension that had been building for weeks. Robert's cologne, sandalwood and something uniquely him, filled her senses. When his fingers brushed against hers, she knew it wasn't accidental. "Rebecca," he said, his voice low, "I want you to know that whatever is happening between us, isn't something I planned." "Nothing is happening," she replied automatically, though her racing pulse suggested otherwise. The elevator arrived at the penthouse, and Rebecca fumbled with her keycard. Inside, the afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the emptiness of her gilded cage. "Would you like some coffee?" she offered, desperate for normalcy. Robert shook his head. "I think we both know I shouldn't stay." He stood in the foyer, powerful and assured in a way that William, for all his success, had never mastered. Robert Harrison had built an empire from nothing, had weathered failures and triumphs, had loved and lost. The life experience etched. In the lines around his eyes gave him a depth William lacked. "I can't stop thinking about you," he admitted, the directness of his confession stealing her breath. "And I think you feel it too." Rebecca backed against the wall, needing the support. "You're William's father." "And you're his wife," Robert acknowledged, "which is why I've tried to keep my distance. But seeing you fade away in this marriage, watching your spirit diminish with each passing month, I can't stand by and watch it happen." "What exactly are you proposing?" Rebecca asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Robert stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. "I'm not proposing anything. I'm acknowledging what's already here between us. The choice is yours, Rebecca. It always has been." The moment stretched between them, possibility and peril in equal measure. Rebecca knew she should ask him to leave, should remember her vows, should think of William. Instead, she thought of herself, the woman she'd been before, the woman she could be again, the woman who had needs and desires that had gone unmet for too long. When she finally moved, it was toward him, not away. Her lips met his in a kiss that began tentatively, but quickly blazed into something urgent and undeniable. Robert's arms encircled her, lifting her slightly as he pressed her against the wall, his body firm and insistent against hers. "We shouldn't," she gasped when they broke apart, though her hands were already pulling him toward her again. "Tell me to go," he challenged, his breath warm against her neck. "Tell me you don't want this and I'll leave." Rebecca couldn't find the words, or perhaps didn't want to. Instead, she led him deeper into the apartment, to the spare bedroom where she sometimes slept, when William worked late into the night. Not their marital bed. She wasn't ready to cross that particular line. What followed was everything her relationship with William was not. Passionate, desperate, focused entirely on her pleasure rather than obligation. Robert's experience was evident in every touch, every response to her body's signals. When it was over, lying in the tangled sheets, Rebecca felt both satisfied and horrified by what they'd done. "This can't happen again," she said, pulling the marb sheet around her naked body. Robert propped himself up on one elbow, studying her face. "You don't mean that. I'm married to your son. A son who doesn't see you, doesn't appreciate you." Robert traced the curve of her shoulder with his finger. "When was the last time William made you feel like this?" The question hit a nerve because Rebecca couldn't remember. The early passion of their relationship had faded into perfunctory intimacy, scheduled around William's business commitments. "That doesn't justify betraying him," she argued, though the conviction in her voice was weak. "No," Robert agreed. "Nothing justifies betrayal, but nothing justifies living half a life either." He sat up, reaching for his discarded clothes. "I won't pressure you, Rebecca. What happens next is entirely your decision." As he dressed, Rebecca watched him, conflicted, emotions warring within her. The guilt was there, yes, but underneath it was something more troubling, a sense of rightness, of having finally claimed something for herself in a life that had become about maintaining appearances and fulfilling expectations. Robert kissed her forehead before leaving, a gesture somehow more intimate than what they'd shared in bed. Think about what you want, Rebecca. Not what William wants, not what the Harrison name demands. What you want. After he left, Rebecca showered, trying to wash away the evidence of her transgression. She changed the sheets, sprayed perfume in the room, erased all physical traces of what had happened, but she couldn't erase the feeling that something fundamental had shifted inside her. That night, William called from Singapore, his face on the video screen distracted as he divided his attention between her and his laptop. "The deal's going well," he reported. "We should be able to announce by next week. How are things there? Anything I should know about?" Rebecca thought about the warmth of Robert's skin against hers, the way he'd whispered her name as if it was sacred. "Nothing important," she lied. "Just the usual." "Good," William replied, already looking back at his laptop. "I should wrap this up. Early meeting tomorrow. Love you." The screen went dark before Rebecca could respond. She sat alone in the vast penthouse, her phone lighting up with a text from Robert. "I meant what I said. The choice is yours. But know that I see you, all of you, and what I see is magnificent." Rebecca stared at the message for a long time before typing her response. "When can I see you again?" She pressed send before she could change her mind, stepping decisively into the secret world they were creating. A world where she was no longer just an extension of the Harrison name, but a woman with desires and dreams of her own. A world where betrayal and fulfillment twined together in a dangerous, irresistible dance. The affair blossomed in stolen moments, afternoons in Robert's downtown pied-à-terre, weekend meetings disguised as foundation work, text messages deleted immediately. After reading, Rebecca felt herself coming alive again, rediscovering the passionate woman who had been buried beneath the polished veneer of Mrs. William Harrison. With Robert's encouragement, she began painting again, converting a room in his apartment into a makeshift studio. Her work evolved, becoming bolder, more raw, expressions of the tumultuous emotions swirling within her. Robert would watch her paint for hours, offering insights without judgment, celebrating her talent in ways William never had. "You should show these," he told her one afternoon, as she stood back from a particularly powerful canvas, a maelstrom of reds and blues that captured the conflicting emotions of their relationship. Rebecca shook her head. "They're too personal." What she didn't say was that these paintings were evidence, emotional documentation of her infidelity. "The world deserves to see your talent," Robert insisted. "I know a gallery owner in Soho who owes me a favor." The idea both thrilled and terrified her. What would William say? Robert's expression hardened slightly. "Does his opinion still matter so much?" "He's still my husband," Rebecca replied, the words sounding hollow even to her own ears. "A husband who hasn't noticed that his wife has been having an affair with his father for nearly 3 months. Robert's bluntness made her flinch. They rarely acknowledged the reality of their situation so directly. William has been busy with the Singapore expansion. It was a weak defense, but Rebecca felt compelled to offer it. Despite everything, she couldn't quite silence the voice of guilt that whispered through her moments of happiness with Robert. "He's always busy, Rebecca. That's who he is, who I raised him to be." Robert pulled her into his arms, his embrace both comforting and possessive. "I created a son in my image, and now I'm paying the price by wanting what he has." The raw honesty in his voice moved her. In these moments, Robert showed a vulnerability that William never allowed himself, a willingness to acknowledge his flaws and regrets. It made their connection feel deeper than just physical attraction or forbidden excitement. Later that week, William returned from Singapore, bringing expensive gifts and distracted affection. Rebecca accepted both with practiced grace, the performance of happy wife now requiring more effort than ever. She wore the jade necklace he'd brought her to dinner that night, feeling the weight of it like a collar around her neck. The merger is official, William announced over steaks at their favorite restaurant. Dad's thrilled, says it's the most significant expansion since he founded the company. Rebecca felt her heart rate accelerate at the mention of Robert. Oh, you've spoken with him. Conference call this morning. William cut into his steak with surgical precision. He suggested we all celebrate this weekend at the Hamptons' house. I told him we'd be there. Rebecca nearly choked on her wine. This weekend? Is that a problem? William looked up, really seeing her for perhaps the first time that evening. I thought you'd be happy about it. You and Dad seem to get along so well lately. There was something in his tone, a slight edge that might have been suspicion or merely irritation at her lack of enthusiasm. Rebecca quickly rearranged her features into a smile. Of course, it sounds lovely. I was just surprised because I thought you'd want to rest after all your traveling. William's expression relaxed. It's important to celebrate wins like this. Besides, Dad mentioned you've been working on some new paintings. He thought the light in the beach house would be perfect for you to continue. Rebecca's stomach twisted. Robert had mentioned her art to William. Was he being careless or deliberately playing with fire? That was thoughtful of him, she managed to say. William nodded absently, his attention already back on his phone. The art thing is good for you. Gives you something to focus on while I'm working. The dismissive comment stung, especially after the way Robert had celebrated her talent. It's not just a hobby, William, it's who I am. He looked up, surprised by her tone. I know that, Becca. I'm glad you're getting back to it. He reached across the table to take her hand. Maybe we could hang some of your new pieces in the penthouse. The gesture of support, minimal, though it was, sparked a flicker of guilt in Rebecca's chest. When William made an effort, she could still see traces of the man she'd agreed to marry, the one she'd believed could make her happy. I'd like that, she said softly. The drive to the Hamptons that Friday was tense, at least for Rebecca. William drove with one hand on the wheel, the other scrolling through emails on his phone, filling the silence with updates about the merger that required no response from her. Rebecca stared out the window, mentally rehearsing how she would act around Robert in William's presence, how she would hide the intimate knowledge of each other they now possessed. Robert's black Range Rover was already parked in the circular driveway when they arrived. He emerged from the house as they pulled up, the picture of the welcoming father, casual in expensive linen pants and a light blue button-down that matched his eyes that betrayed nothing when they met Rebecca's. There they are, he called, embracing William with a hearty pat on the back before turning to Rebecca with a perfectly appropriate kiss on the cheek. Only she felt the slight pressure of his fingers at her waist, a silent acknowledgement of what lay beneath, the family facade. The house looks amazing, Dad, William said, glancing around at the freshly landscaped grounds. New hedges. Among other improvements, Robert replied. Wait until you see what I've done with the sunroom. I had it converted into a proper studio space. Thought Rebecca might appreciate it. William looked pleased. See, Becca? Dad supports your art thing too. Rebecca caught the slight twitch in Robert's jaw at his son's choice of words. It's very thoughtful, she said carefully. The studio conversion was indeed spectacular. North-facing windows, professional-grade easels, storage for canvases, and even a small sink for cleaning brushes. It was exactly what Rebecca would have designed for herself had anyone bothered to ask what she wanted. This is incredible, she breathed, running her fingers along the custom workbench. Only the best for family, Robert said, his voice carrying a double meaning that made her cheeks warm. William was already checking his phone again. I need to make a few calls. Dad, mind showing Rebecca around while I handle this? Shouldn't take more than an hour. My pleasure, Robert replied, his expression neutral even as his eyes darkened with intent. The moment William disappeared up the stairs to the home office, Robert pulled Rebecca into the supply closet of the studio, his mouth finding hers in a hungry kiss. This is insane, she gasped when they broke apart. He's right upstairs. That's what makes it exciting, Robert murmured against her neck. The risk. Rebecca pushed him away, straightening her blouse. No, not here, not with William in the house. This weekend was a mistake. We need to be careful. Robert studied her face. Are you having second thoughts? About betraying my husband under his own roof? Yes, Rebecca hissed, though she made no move to leave the closet. About us, Robert clarified, his gaze intense. Rebecca sighed, leaning against the shelves of art supplies. I don't know what we're doing, Robert. This can't end well. For any of us? It could, he countered, if you were honest about what you want. Meaning? Leave him, Robert said simply. William is my son and I love him, but he'll never make you happy. He doesn't know how. Rebecca stared at him, stunned by the directness of his proposal. You want me to leave your son for you? I want you to leave a loveless marriage for a chance at real happiness. He took her hands in his. I'm not asking you to make a scene. A quiet divorce, a reasonable waiting period, and then we could start fresh. Somewhere new, maybe. Paris, London, wherever you want to paint. The vision he painted was seductive. Freedom from the golden handcuffs of her marriage, a life with someone who saw and valued her as more than an accessory. But beneath the allure lay a tangle of complications Rebecca couldn't ignore. William would be devastated, she said. Not because he loves me so passionately, but because failure isn't in his vocabulary. And then to discover it was you. He never has to know about us, Robert argued. Not right away, at least. Secrets always come out, Rebecca countered. Always. The sound of footsteps on the stairs silenced them both. Rebecca slipped out of the closet first, pretending to examine the brushes on a nearby table when William entered the studio. Calls. Done, he announced. What do you think of Dad's surprise, Becca? It's perfect, she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. I can't wait to use it. You should start. Now, Robert suggested. William and I can handle dinner preparations. I've got steaks marinating. William nodded. Good idea. You've been talking about getting back to your painting for months. Make the most of the weekend. Alone in the studio, after they left, Rebecca set up a canvas, her mind swirling with Robert's proposition. Leave William, start over. The idea was simultaneously terrifying and liberating. What would her parents say? Her friends? Would she become a pariah in the easy social circles that had reluctantly accepted her as William's wife? She began to paint almost unconsciously, bold strokes across the canvas forming a landscape that resembled the view from the studio windows, but distorted, fragmented, like looking through broken glass. It captured her fractured emotions perfectly. The beauty of what she'd found with Robert, twisted by the ugliness of deception. Hours passed as she worked, the familiar process of creation centering her like nothing else could. This was who she was beneath the polished exterior, an artist who translated emotion into color and form, who found truth in the act of creation. She didn't hear the studio door open, didn't realize she wasn't alone, until William spoke. That's intense, he said, standing behind her. Rebecca startled, nearly dropping her brush. I didn't hear you come in. William studied the canvas, his expression unreadable. It's different from your usual style. I'm experimenting, she replied, suddenly self-conscious. The painting revealed too much, her turmoil, her guilt, her secret passion. Dad sent me to tell you dinner's ready, William said, his eyes still on the canvas. He's grilled the steaks. Rebecca set down her palette. I'll clean up and be right there. William lingered, looking at her with unusual focus. Are you happy, Becca? The question caught her off guard. What? With me, with us, with this life. He gestured vaguely around them. Are you happy? It was the first time in years he'd asked her such a direct personal question. Rebecca felt tears threatening and blinked them away. She hesitated, the truth too dangerous to speak aloud. It's complicated. William's jaw tightened. That's not a yes. No, she admitted. It's not. Something shifted in William's expression, a flash of hurt quickly masked by his usual composure. We should talk about this. After dinner. Rebecca nodded, her heart pounding. Yes, we should. The meal was excruciating. Robert playing the gracious host while exchanging loaded glances with Rebecca, William unusually quiet and observant, Rebecca caught between them, picking at her perfectly grilled steak as her appetite disappeared. Under the weight of the evening's tension, the Singapore team sent over the final contracts, William said, breaking a long silence. Everything looks good for Monday's announcement. Excellent, Robert raised his glass. To the future of Harrison Technologies. They all drank, the expensive wine bitter in Rebecca's mouth. The future. What would hers look like after tonight? If she told William the truth about her unhappiness, would he fight for their marriage or let her go? And if she left, could she really build a life with Robert, knowing their relationship was founded on betrayal? As Robert stood to clear the plates, his phone fell from his pocket, landing face up on the floor. The screen illuminated with a text notification from Rebecca sent weeks earlier. Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. Time seemed to stop as William's eyes fell on the message, clearly visible to everyone at the table. Rebecca felt the blood drain from her face as Robert quickly snatched up the phone, but it was too late. The damage was done. William looked from his father to his wife, the realization dawning in his eyes with terrible clarity. William, Rebecca began, but the words died in her throat. The mask of composure William had worn his entire life cracked, revealing a raw pain that stole Rebecca's breath. Without a word, he stood from the table, chair scraping harshly against the floor, and walked out. The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the beach house, followed moments later by the roar of his car engine as he sped away into the night. Rebecca and Robert sat in stunned silence, the enormity of what had just happened settling over them like a shroud. I should go after him, Robert finally said, though he made no move to stand. No, Rebecca whispered. I should. Robert shook his head. He's not safe to drive in that state. Let him cool off. He reached for her hand, across the table. This isn't how I wanted him to find out. Rebecca pulled her hand away. You wanted him to find out? Disbelief colored her voice. Eventually, yes, Robert admitted. Just not like this. Not before we had a chance to figure out what we want. What we want? Rebecca stood, suddenly furious. Do you realize what we've done? We've destroyed him. Robert's expression hardened. William is stronger than you think. He's a Harrison. So that makes it okay. Betraying your own son. The guilt Rebecca had managed to suppress for months came crashing over her in devastating waves. My God, what have we done? We fell in love, Robert said simply. It happens. Love? Rebecca stared at him. Is that what this is? What else would you call it? Robert stood now too, moving around the table toward her. You can't tell me what we have isn't real. What we have is an affair that just blew up my marriage and your relationship with your son, Rebecca said, backing away from his approach. I need to find William. He'll go to the city, Robert predicted, back to the penthouse to lick his wounds. He won't want to see either of us tonight. Rebecca grabbed her phone, dialing William's number. It went straight to voicemail. William, please call me back. We need to talk. She ended the call, tears streaming down her face. This is a nightmare. It's a revelation, Robert countered. Now everything is in the open. We can stop hiding. Rebecca looked at him with new eyes, suddenly seeing a selfishness she had been blind to before. In her loneliness, she had mistaken his attention for depth, his experience for wisdom, his desire for love. I need to go, she said, grabbing her purse. I'm going back to the city. I'll drive you, Robert offered. No, Rebecca's voice was firm. I'll call a car service. I need space to think. Robert's confidence faltered for the first time. Rebecca, don't let guilt cloud what we have. William hasn't made you happy for years. You said so yourself. That didn't give me the right to betray him, she replied, especially not with you. In the guest room, Rebecca hastily packed her overnight bag, her mind racing. The weight of what she had done, what they had done, pressed on her chest until she could barely breathe. William's face when he saw that text message would haunt her forever. Her phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. "Mrs. Harrison, this is Officer Patterson with the Southampton Police. There's been an incident involving your husband. Please call immediately." The Southampton Memorial Hospital emergency room buzzed with quiet efficiency as Rebecca burst through the doors, her heart hammering against her ribs. "William Harrison." She gasped to the nurse at the reception desk. "I'm his wife. The police called me." The nurse's expression softened with recognition, either of the Harrison name or the panic in Rebecca's eyes. "Mrs. Harrison, your husband is in treatment room 3. Dr. Levine is with him now." "Is he?" Rebecca couldn't bring herself to finish the question. "The doctor will explain everything," the nurse replied, buzzing her through the security. "Doors." Rebecca nearly ran down the corridor, following the numbered signs until she reached room 3. Through the glass partition, she could see William lying on a gurney, eyes closed, a bandage wrapped around his head. The middle-aged woman in a white coat stood beside him, making notes on a tablet. "Mrs. Harrison?" The doctor looked up as Rebecca entered. "I'm Dr. Levine. Your husband was lucky tonight." "What happened?" Rebecca moved to William's side, reaching for his hand. It was cold and unresponsive in hers. "He lost control of his vehicle on Shore Road, went into a ditch. The airbags deployed, which probably saved his life, but he has a moderate concussion, a broken wrist, and some facial lacerations from the broken glass." Dr. Levine's clinical assessment couldn't mask the seriousness in her tone. "We've done CT scans to rule out internal bleeding. Those came back clear, but we'd like to keep him overnight for observation. The concussion is our primary concern." Rebecca stared at William's face, pale against the white hospital pillow. A cut above his right eyebrow had been stitched, and bruising was already forming around his left eye. This was her fault. Her betrayal had sent him speeding into the night, distracted by pain and anger. Was alcohol involved? Rebecca asked quietly. Dr. Levine glanced at the chart. His blood alcohol was 0.09, just over the legal limit. The responding officer said there was an open bottle of scotch in the passenger seat. William rarely drank hard liquor, and never while driving. The image of him gulping straight from a bottle as he sped down dark roads made Rebecca's stomach churn with guilt. "When will he wake up?" she asked. "We've given him some medication for the pain, so he'll probably be out for a few hours. You're welcome to stay." Dr. Levine hesitated. The police officer mentioned there was some family situation that preceded the accident. Rebecca swallowed hard. "Yes, we had an argument." The doctor nodded without judgment. "I see. Well, when he wakes up, try to keep things calm. Emotional stress isn't good for recovery from concussion." After the doctor left, Rebecca pulled a chair close to William's bedside, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. His usually perfect appearance was gone. Designer clothes replaced by a hospital gown, styled hair matted with dried blood they hadn't completely cleaned away, stubble shadowing his jaw. He looked vulnerable in a way Rebecca had never seen before. Her phone buzzed insistently in her purse. Robert, again. She had ignored his calls and texts since leaving the beach house, too focused on getting to the hospital, too ashamed to speak to him. Finally, she stepped into the hallway to answer. "Is he okay?" Robert's voice held genuine concern. "He's alive," Rebecca replied coldly. "No thanks to us." "Rebecca, this wasn't our fault. William chose to drive angry, chose to drink. Don't you dare," she hissed. "Don't you dare try to absolve us. We did this to him." A long pause followed. "I'm coming to the hospital." "No, you're not." Rebecca's tone brooked no argument. "You're the last person he needs to see when he wakes up. He's my son. A son you betrayed in the worst possible way." Rebecca leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. "I need to go. He might wake up." "What are you going to tell him?" It was the question Rebecca had been asking herself during the entire frantic drive to the hospital. The truth, as much as he wants to hear. "And what about us?" The question hung in the air, weighted with possibility and consequences. Rebecca closed her eyes. There is no us, Robert. There never should have been. She ended the call before he could respond, turning her phone off completely before returning to William's room. The steady beep of the heart monitor provided a rhythm to her chaotic thoughts as she settled back into the chair. I'm so sorry, she whispered to her unconscious husband. Sometime later, Rebecca awoke to the sound of movement. William's eyes were open, disoriented, and clouded with pain as they focused on her. William, she breathed, sitting up straight. You're awake. How do you feel? He stared at her for a long moment, as if trying to place her in his memory. Like I drove into a ditch, he finally said, his voice hoarse. Rebecca reached for the water cup on the side table, helping him take a small sip through the straw. The doctor said you have a concussion and a broken wrist. She gestured to the cast she hadn't noticed before. William looked down at his immobilized left arm. Dominant hand. Ironic. He leaned back against the pillow, wincing. Why are you here? The question was simple but loaded with meaning. Rebecca felt tears threatening again. The police called me. I came right away. No, William clarified, his eyes sharpening despite the medication. Why are you here pretending to care? Shouldn't you be with my father? The bitterness in his voice cut through her. William, How long? He interrupted. How long have you been sleeping with him? Rebecca flinched at the directness of the question. 3 months, she admitted, unable to lie anymore. William closed his eyes, absorbing the blow. 3 months, he repeated, while I was in Singapore, Tokyo, London. His eyes opened again, fixing her with an intensity that belied his injured state. Why him? Of all people, why my father? It was the question Rebecca had been asking herself since that first kiss in the penthouse. He was there, she said simply. He saw me when you didn't. Saw you? William's laugh was harsh, triggering a grimace of pain. He saw an opportunity. He's always been like that, taking what isn't his because he can. That's not fair. Rebecca found herself defending Robert despite her earlier anger. What happened? Between us wasn't one-sided. No, I suppose it wasn't. William's gaze was clinical now, examining her as if she were a business problem to solve. Were you unhappy, Rebecca, or just bored? The question stung because it simplified something that felt so complex to her. Both, maybe. I lost myself in our marriage, William. I became what you needed me to be, the perfect wife, the perfect hostess, the perfect accessory to your success. But inside I was disappearing. And you couldn't talk to me about this. His voice cracked slightly. You had to go to him. I tried, Rebecca insisted. For years I tried. But you were always working, always focused on the next deal, the next expansion. Our conversations became logistics and schedules. When was the last time you asked me about my dreams, my art, the things that make me who I am? William was silent, his jaw working as he processed her words. I'm not justifying what I did, Rebecca continued. It was wrong, so wrong, and I will regret it for the rest of my life. But our marriage was broken long before Robert. William turned his face away, staring at the wall. I want a divorce. The words shouldn't have hurt. After everything that had happened, a divorce was the only logical outcome, but they still landed like a physical blow. I understand, Rebecca whispered. No, you don't, William said, still not looking at her. You have no idea what you've done. The Harrison name means something in this city, in this country. This scandal will be everywhere. The son, the father, the unfaithful wife. Our stock will take a hit. Partners will question our stability. Everything I've built. Of course, his thoughts would go to the business implications. Rebecca felt a familiar disappointment settle over her. Is that all you care about? Your reputation? Your company? William finally turned back to her, eyes glittering with unshed tears. What else do I have left? You've taken everything else. The raw vulnerability in his voice shocked her. In all their years together, she had never seen William Harrison cry. Not when his mother missed their wedding, not when deals fell through, not even at his grandfather's funeral. William had been raised to believe that emotions were weaknesses, obstacles to success that needed to be controlled. "I didn't mean to hurt you," Rebecca said softly. "That almost makes it worse." William closed his eyes again, fatigue etching lines around his mouth. "You should go. My lawyer will contact yours tomorrow." "William, please, go," he repeated, his voice firm despite his weakened state. "I can't look at you right now." Rebecca gathered her purse with trembling hands. At the door, she paused. "For what it's worth, I did love you. Maybe not in the way you needed, but I did." William didn't respond, his eyes still closed, his body rigid with pain, both physical and emotional. Outside the hospital, dawn was breaking over the Southampton skyline, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed mockingly beautiful against the devastation of the night. Rebecca sat in her rental car, too exhausted to drive but with nowhere to go. The beach house was out of the question. She couldn't face Robert now. The penthouse felt equally impossible. That was William's domain, and she was no longer welcome there. She was suddenly starkly alone in a way she hadn't been since before her marriage. No husband, no lover, no clear path forward, just the wreckage of choices made and the uncertain future those choices had created. Her phone, when she turned it back on, was flooded with messages. Most from Robert, growing increasingly frantic, but also several from unknown numbers. Journalists, she realized with a sinking feeling. Somehow the story had already leaked. William's accident, their argument, possibly even the affair. The Harrison name was news, especially when scandal was involved. One text caught her eye. From Megan, her former art school roommate whom she'd largely lost touch with after marrying William. "Heard about what happened. If you need a place to stay, my door is always open. No questions asked." The unexpected kindness brought fresh tears to Rebecca's eyes. Here was someone offering sanctuary without judgment, a rare gift in the storm she found herself in. She typed back a quick, "Thank you. I might take you up on that," then started the car, programming Megan's Brooklyn address into the GPS. As she drove away from the hospital, from William, from the life she had built and destroyed, Rebecca felt a strange sense of lightness beneath the guilt and grief. For the first time in years, she was making a choice solely for herself, not as William's wife, not as Robert's mistress, but as Rebecca, the woman and artist who had been buried beneath obligations and expectations for too long. The realization didn't erase the pain she had caused or the consequences she would face, but it offered a small beacon of hope in the darkness, a reminder that even from the ashes of terrible mistakes, new beginnings were possible. What she didn't see as she drove away was Robert's black Range Rover pulling into the hospital parking lot, or the determination on his face as he strode toward the entrance, intent on seeing his son despite Rebecca's warnings. She didn't see the paparazzi who had already gathered, alerted by hospital staff that a Harrison family drama was unfolding. And she couldn't know that the confrontation about to take place between father and son would set in motion events that would change all their lives in ways none of them could have imagined. 6 months after the accident, Rebecca stood in a small Soho gallery, watching as strangers examined her paintings. Her Fractured Truth collection, a series of works exploring betrayal, guilt, and ultimately healing, had attracted unexpected attention in the New York art scene. The raw emotion captured in her brushstrokes resonated with viewers, drawing them into her personal journey without revealing its specific details. "The critics are calling you the breakout artist of the year," Megan said, appearing at her side with 2 glasses of champagne. "How does it feel?" Rebecca accepted the glass, taking a small sip. "Surreal. A year ago, I was planning William's company gala, worried about seating arrangements and floral displays. Now I'm here." "As yourself," Megan pointed out. "Finally." The observation was accurate. In the months since leaving the Harrison world behind, Rebecca had reclaimed pieces of herself that had been suppressed during her marriage. She'd moved into a modest apartment in Brooklyn, supported herself with graphic design freelance work while painting at night, and slowly rebuilt her sense of identity outside the expectations of others. The divorce had been finalized 3 months Earlier, quick, discreet, and financially equitable, thanks to the prenuptial agreement she'd signed. William, to her surprise, had been fair in the settlement, making no attempt to punish her through financial means. They hadn't spoken directly. Everything had been handled through attorneys, his only request being that she not use the Harrison name professionally. She hadn't seen Robert since the night of the accident. According to news reports, he had stepped down as chairman of Harrison Technologies, citing personal reasons and a desire to focus on family healing. The carefully crafted press release had made no mention of the scandal that had rocked Manhattan high society, though plenty of gossip columns had filled in the blanks with varying degrees of accuracy. "There's someone here who's been asking about you," Megan said, interrupting Rebecca's thoughts. Tall guy, expensive suit, keeps staring at the large canvas in the corner. Rebecca followed Megan's subtle nod, her heart skipping when she recognized the familiar silhouette. William stood before her largest painting, a chaotic explosion of blues and reds surrounding a fractured golden frame. It was the most personal piece in the collection, representing the moment everything had shattered. "Do you want me to ask him to leave?" Megan asked, protective as always. Rebecca shook her head. "No, it's okay." She handed her champagne glass back to her friend. "I should talk to him." As she approached, Rebecca noticed the changes in William's appearance. He had lost weight, and his hair was longer than the precisely cut style he had maintained throughout their marriage. The cast was gone from his wrist, but he held that arm slightly differently now, suggesting the injury had left some permanent effect. "William," she said softly, stopping beside him. He turned, his expression unreadable. "Rebecca, congratulations on the show." "Thank you, I'm surprised to see you here." William looked back at the painting. "I saw the review in the Times. They called your work a searing exploration of betrayal and rebirth. I was curious." Rebecca followed his gaze to the canvas. "This one's called The Breaking Point." "I recognize the moment," William said quietly. "The night of the accident." An uncomfortable silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken words and shared history. "How have you been?" Rebecca finally asked. "Busy. The Singapore expansion is complete. Stock prices have recovered from the public relations challenges of last year." His voice was measured, professional, as if delivering a business update. "And personally?" Rebecca pressed gently. William considered the question, his usual mask of composure slipping slightly. "I've been seeing a therapist. Dad's idea, actually, before he left for Europe." The mention of Robert hung in the air between them. "Is he still in London?" Rebecca asked carefully. "Paris now. He bought a villa in the countryside." William's jaw tightened. "We speak occasionally. It's a work in progress." Rebecca nodded, understanding the complexity of the relationship they were trying to rebuild. "I'm sorry, William, for everything." "I know." William turned to face her fully. "That's partly why I'm here. I needed to see you, to know if I was ready." "Ready for what?" "To forgive." The word seemed to surprise him as much as her. "My therapist says I need to confront the pain to move beyond it. So here I am." Rebecca felt tears threatening and blinked them away. "I never expected forgiveness." "Neither did I," William admitted. "For months I was consumed by anger. At you, at my father, at myself for not seeing what was happening. I threw myself into work, staying at the office until midnight, flying to international meetings just to avoid being alone with my thoughts." It was the most personal conversation they'd had in years, possibly ever. Rebecca remained silent, giving him space to continue. "Then one day I was in Tokyo for meetings, and I saw this woman in a cafe painting. Something about her reminded me of you. Not your appearance, but the focus, the passion in her expression. And I realized I never really saw that in you when we were together. I never created space for it. We both made mistakes," Rebecca said softly. William nodded. "Different ones, but yes." He gestured to the paintings surrounding them. "You've found your voice again." "I had to lose everything to find it," Rebecca replied. "That's not a path I'd recommend." "AT." Hint of a smile touched William's lips, the first she'd seen since before that fateful night. Yet here you are, succeeding on your own terms. Perhaps it was the path you needed. Rebecca considered this, the perspective surprising her. Maybe, but the cost was too high. The pain I caused you, the damage to your relationship with your father. Dad and I... William hesitated. We're talking more honestly now than we ever have. Without the company binding us together. We're learning to be father and son instead of business partners. It's uncomfortable but necessary. I'm glad, Rebecca said sincerely. You both deserve that chance. William's phone buzzed in his pocket. He checked it quickly. My car's outside. I have a dinner meeting uptown. Of course. Rebecca stepped back, preparing to say goodbye. Before I go, William said, I wanted to ask, the painting in the catalogue but not on display, the one titled Forgiveness, what does it look like? Rebecca felt her cheeks warm. It's not finished yet. I'm still working on it. Because you haven't found it yet? His perception surprised her. Because it's a process, she corrected gently. For all of us. William nodded, understanding. When it's complete, I'd like to see it. I'll make sure you do, Rebecca promised. As he turned to leave, William paused. One more thing. There's a promising young artist, a college student, interning at Harrison Tech. She reminds me of how you described yourself before we met. I was thinking of establishing a scholarship foundation for emerging artists, particularly women who lack financial resources to pursue their passion. Would you consider being on the advisory board? Your perspective would be valuable. The offer stunned Rebecca. You want me involved in a Harrison initiative? After everything? Because of everything, William clarified. We failed each other in our marriage, but perhaps we can succeed at this, creating something positive from the experience. Rebecca found herself nodding. I'd be honored. A genuine smile transformed William's face, making him look younger, more like the man she had first met years ago. Good. My assistant will be in touch with details. He extended his hand. Goodbye, Rebecca. She took his hand, feeling the formal gesture was exactly right for this moment, a new beginning built on mutual respect rather than the complicated emotions of their past. Goodbye, William. After he left, Rebecca remained in front of the breaking point, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed, becoming something she could translate into art, into growth, into a future different from but not entirely separate from her past. Her phone chimed with a text message. Expecting Megan, she was surprised to see Robert's name on the screen, the first contact in 6 months. Saw the Times review. Proud of you for finding your voice. If you're ever in Paris and want to talk, my door is open. No expectations. Rebecca stared at the message, complex emotions swirling through her. There had been real feelings between them, distorted though they were by the circumstances. In another life, without the complications of family ties and marital vows, perhaps, they could have built something meaningful. After a long moment, she typed back, "Thank you. I'm focusing on my journey now, but I appreciate the open door. I hope you're finding peace as well." She didn't wait for a response, silencing her phone and returning it to her purse. Whatever future awaited her, she knew it needed to be one she created for herself, defined by her choices rather than by her relationships with the Harrison men. "Everything okay?" Megan asked, returning to her side. Rebecca nodded, a genuine sense of peace settling over her. "Yes, better than okay, actually. That red dot beside the breaking point means it's sold," Megan informed her with a grin. "Some anonymous buyer paid the full asking price without negotiation." Rebecca glanced back at the painting, wondering if William had purchased it as part of his healing process. It didn't matter, she decided. The act of creating it had been her own therapy, and now it would continue its journey, just as she would continue hers. "The gallery owner wants to discuss a follow-up show next spring," Megan continued. "You've made quite an impression." "I'm just getting started," Rebecca replied, feeling a confidence that came from within rather than from external validation. Later that night, Back in her Brooklyn apartment with its large windows and paint-splattered floors, Rebecca stood before a canvas she had kept hidden from the gallery show. Forgiveness was indeed unfinished, the composition still taking shape. A sunrise breaking through storm clouds, golden light beginning to illuminate a landscape still partially in shadow. She picked up her brush, mixing colors on her palette with deliberate care. The painting wasn't just about forgiving William or Robert or even herself. It was about understanding that healing wasn't a destination, but a continuing process, that redemption came not from erasing the past, but from creating meaning from it. As she added strokes of gold to the canvas, Rebecca thought about the scholarship foundation William had proposed. It represented a different kind of legacy than the one she had imagined when she became a Harrison. Not the perpetuation of wealth and status, but the creation of opportunity for others to find their voices as she had finally found hers. Outside, her window, New York, glittered in the darkness, the same city where her story had unfolded but somehow new to her eyes. In losing the golden handcuffs of her former life, she had gained something more valuable, the freedom to paint her own future, one brushstroke at a time. Rebecca added a final touch of light to the horizon in her painting, not completing it, but advancing it, understanding that some works, like life itself, evolved over time. Tomorrow would bring another day, another canvas, another chance to transform pain into beauty. And for the first time in years, she was ready for whatever that canvas might hold. As the first light of dawn filtered through her studio windows, Rebecca stepped back from the painting, brush still in hand, a smile of quiet satisfaction on her face. The canvas wasn't perfect. Nothing truly meaningful ever was, but it was authentic, honest, and entirely her own. And that, she had finally learned, was enough. Fim da Historia. Dear listeners, we hope that Rebecca's journey from gilded cage to artistic freedom has moved you. Her story reminds us that finding our authentic selves sometimes requires difficult choices and painful growth. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about rediscovery and redemption. Find it by clicking the link to your left. If you connected with Rebecca's struggle to reclaim her voice, please subscribe to our channel and like this video. Every day, we bring you unique narratives that explore life's complexities and the human capacity for renewal. Don't miss our upcoming content. We have many more stories waiting to be told. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.